Hey, what's up, YouTube? It's Logan, the Metal and Beer Snob, and tonight I'm here with a Metal and Beer pairing. It's been a little bit since I've done one of these, but I have felt inspired to bring this back to talk about an important album, I think, for an important and underrated band. I want to make sure it gets the spotlight and the credit that it's due. And I'm talking about Raven's latest album, All Hell's Breaking Loose. Let's crack a beer and dive in. And to pair with such a classic band and such a classic style of music, I have to turn back the clock on craft beer and go back to the classics. And to me, one of the most classic styles is a Pilsner, especially a German Pilsner. So here we go, Radeberger from Germany. I'm not going to try to pronounce too much else about this beer. I will just say it has that classic Pilsner flavor. And I gotta use a classic Stein glass. Prost. Yeah, that's the good stuff. If you know your German beer, it's packed with flavor, but then at the very same time, it's light and it's not gonna weigh you down. All the flavor you have without, tasting like a loaf of bread, like some American craft beer can be. Perfect for a lean, mean Raven album. So I think to start out the review, I have to give some backstory, if you will. So I first encountered Raven and decided to try to get into this band a couple years back when I was like, all right, well, what else is there in the new wave of British heavy metal scene besides Maiden and Priest? Raven was one of the first bands that I was kind of recommended and encountered, and it was largely due to finding Wiped Out for a good price, in the used bin. This has been a great album for me, and one that I have played constantly on and off throughout the years since I picked it up. Just a great slab of very hard rock, but vicious, working man, new wave of British heavy metal. It doesn't dive into the occult or into the dark sides of metal like some of the Brethren and Angel Witch, and remains very much like that Saxon style of working man new album. Really, Raven has been one of those bands that whenever I see one of their albums, I'll pick it up. So I have probably two other albums and a greatest hits in my collection as well. What I really was not aware of is that they are just a consistent band through and through that have been going for 50 years up to this date. 2024 is their 50th anniversary. That's right. They've been going since 1974, non-fucking stop. Honestly, they're one of the hardest working and most underrated bands in the metal scene, period. I kind of realized this because I finally had the chance to see them live here in New Orleans about a month back at the end of March. I witnessed them at this fairly mid-sized venue. I mean, it could probably hold around 500 to 1,000 people. It was less than packed, let's say that. But you know what? Raven did not give a shit. They came out and they performed an hour and 15-minute long set. They gave it their all the whole time. Every single thing about their performance was on par. They blew my socks off just seeing them live. And kind of in preparation for seeing them live, I had been checking out this album, their latest one from last year, as I said, All Hell's Breaking Loose. And, I didn't enjoyed it. It hadn't clicked with me really, but I had definitely been liking what I'd heard. But since seeing them live, I am kind of appreciating this in a whole new light. So I really wanted to, get the chance to talk about not just this album, but really just talk about Raven in general and where they're currently sitting in the realm of metal music, and why I think, you should pay more attention to them and, give this album a spin and give some of their more classic pieces of music a spin as well. Let's dive in. So as I said, I do have a limited history with them. So I think with me approaching All Hell's Breaking Loose, I have to acknowledge my limited history. I've listened to Wiped Out. I've listened to, Rock Till You Drop. I've heard some of their other comeback albums, because they had that interesting period where they ended up on the major label and produced supposedly some subpar content. So I've heard some of the stuff that came out right after that, like the late 80s. Great blistering stuff. And maybe that's why I feel like this fits perfectly in with what I know of them. This is a blistering album. One of my favorites from their comeback, Nothing Exceeds Like Excess, is a blistering album, and this one especially is. And I guess now is a good time to say that this is what we've got spinning in the background. So whatever you hear behind the scenes that you like, yeah, it's all Raven, baby. Well, first let's talk about the band a little bit more. So, of course, this is a 3-piece, and since the beginning of time, they have been anchored by the dynamic duo, the Set of Brothers, John and Mark Gallagher. So, John Gallagher is the bassist and like the lead vocalist, and then Mark is, guitar and backing vocals. The drummer has been the rotating member throughout the years, but consistently been one of the strongest parts of the band. Like, looking back in like the classic 80s output, the drummer was on par. I mean, on this album, we had Rob Hunter, who did an exceptional job. And on this album, we actually are graced with, Mike Heller, who I would consider to be the secret weapon of this album and of this band overall. I mean, he brings in some extreme metal drumming, some legitimate blast beats, thrash metal like patterns, exceptional like double bass and endurance that I think really gives this album the intensity that it needs. I mean, from the first listen, I knew that the drumming was special and the drummer was special, and then upon more inspection, I realized that Mike Heller, he's a familiar name for a reason. He played in Fear Factory on some albums we might recognize. He's the drummer of Malignancy, also on some albums that we might recognize. And he is in a project currently with Mr. John Gallagher called Helm's Deep that got some other interest last year. But then, in addition to the drumming, the guitar work is on point as well. And just everything else is so tight and concise and focused. And I think that's really what helps this album as well, is tight songwriting. This is a 34-minute album that, due to the level of energy brought by the drums and how focused the songwriting is, it flies by. And yeah, it feels like a half hour, not more, not less, like a solid half hour of just heavy metal intensity, no nonsense. Let's highlight some of the songs that help to keep this thing moving. There's really two different types of songs, fast and faster. Surf the Tsunami, fucking fast, great chorus. All Hell's Breaking Loose, also fast. Super, energetic, anthemic chorus to scream along to. Desperate Measures, fast, somewhat maniacal. And then finally, when we get to the faster songs, I'm talking about Turn of the Screw, track 9, Invasion, blistering. I mean, and then the final track, Go for Gold, there's some definite extreme metal drumming on here. And then when they break down to focus on the choruses too, those are the songs that stick with you. Track 5, The Far Side, great chorus. And then the best song on the album, Victory's Call. It has such an emotional draw to its chorus. It gets stuck in your head. The hook is perfect. And it just feels like desperate and triumphant in the same breath, you know? It's great. Best song on the album. And then to kind of talk about the elephant in the room, why isn't Raven talked about as much as they should be? Like, I swear, albums from other new wave of British heavy metal bands like Angel Witch and Satan are a lot more hyped than, new albums by Raven. God knows Saxon's latest output is definitely overly talked about, especially, when you consider how many albums they have, and, they don't sound as energetic as this band. I think it's just because they've kind of lived in the shadow for so long and never carved out a niche as much as their own as some of the other bands. Saxon at least owned that, like, denim and leather motorcycle gang, from the beginning. And I think Raven kind of ended up in their footsteps in in hindsight. And then as soon as, like, the later 80s came along, and especially when we're talking about Raven in 2024, they've lost the arms race, They're straddling a weird sound right now. They're somewhere in between, like, new wave of British heavy metal, what traditional heavy metal sounds like, and some kind of, like, speed metal, power metal hybrid. And they don't fit neatly in either one. Like, the presentation doesn't necessarily fit. Like, they're going for some kind of comic book hero style, which, it's fun. Like, it's fucking fun. And it might just be too fun for what the scene is looking for. Like, look at this, the back of the CD booklet. It's got these comic book frames of the members, destroying different aliens and stuff. It's fucking awesome. If a little ridiculous. So it's a shame, They are a special band for metal, and a band that should be, and I think will be, remembered for their 50 years of contributions. I think because of the 50-year legacy, it really does keep them from fitting neatly in the scene. But then at the very end, it will make them stand out and make them special and be remembered for the long term. And even if they don't end up being, like, the most hyped band from a year, or a band that people want to go to see on tour every single time they come through, doesn't mean they're not going to do what Raven does best, which is work hard, bust their ass, and just rock the fuck out every night. That's what they did when I saw them, and that's what they fucking do on this album. All hell's breaking loose. So, if you're looking for a heavy metal album with just a heavy set of balls in 2024, please look to the legends themselves, Raven. Please look to All Hell's Breaking Loose. It packs the perfect punch and memorability that you want. So that's why I'm giving this album a 4.3 out of 5 or 8.6 out of 10 on Drunken Metalhead Reviews. Cheers. Thanks for watching. drink good beer, listen to good metal.
All hell's break